you can see that we get back a real user ID. Great. So now we know that we're passing that user ID to the event form, and hopefully now it should be passed over all the way to when we create an event, and that should allow us to actually create it. So one more time, allow me to fill this out and click create. It's submitting. It's uploading. There we go. That's good. It's uploaded, but this time we got a different kind of error. It says string value user cast error cast to object ID failed for value user ID this ID. Interesting. Let's also open up the console here. And we get a similar error. If we go to network and try to just resubmit it, you'll also be able to see the same thing. And if you scroll a bit above, you can see right here that we have a string value of user ID, and it's saying that input must be a 24-character hex string. So is it possible that I messed up with copying my string? Let's see. If I go to our database, we have 6575 ending in 69F. That is our ID. And if I go right here, 657569F, this looks good to me. Just to be safe, let me try to just log in with a new account and start it all over. I logged in from a new account, this time not real JSM, but JS Mastery, and I'll try to click Create Event. It's submitting it, uploading, and there we go. We have the same error. Let's start working off of the information that is provided to us. Here, we can see that we're accepting some kind of string value of an empty object, and it's saying that the reason is that the input must be a 24-character hex string, and this is referring to the object ID of a specific document. And if we go to our models right here, specifically the event model, we can notice that we only have two instances where we have an ID. It can be a user that is creating it, where we need to pass the reference to the object ID of the user creating it, or it could be the category ID we're connecting to it. So one of those two, in our case, is not a full object ID string. So let's figure it out. I close all of the files that I had opened. I like to do this when I'm starting with the debugging process. And I want to go to Actions Event right here. And because this is where it's actually failing, we're passing the category ID and the organizer ID right here. And one of these is not what it should be. So what we can do is we can console.log, instead of an object, the category ID equal to event.category ID, and the organizer ID, which is going to be equal to the user ID. And we can see which one of these two is empty or faulty. So what we can do is now just click Create Event. This should be happening on the backend side, so we should be able to see it right here in our console. There we go. We get our typical error, but if we scroll a bit up, do we get anything else? Not really. I don't see much. It's easy to miss it right here. Let's open up the console on our browser as well. And go here. Same error that we had before. But if we go to the network tab, maybe we can see it there. So let's click Create Event. It's going to do the same thing once again. But this time we should be able to see what the server says. We have a 500, and we can see exactly the data we're passing. The category ID is right here. It's looking good. But as you can see, the user ID is an empty object. That's not looking good. So maybe it's related to that error that we had before, not properly getting the user ID from clerk. To fix it, we can go back to our page where we create an event. So that's events create. And we can figure out what value this returns by simply running console log user ID. Now, this should happen once we open up the create page. I don't want to mess with my data right here, so I'm going to open up a new one in a new tab. And once you do that and go to the console, you can see that we have an object of user ID. So instead of saying user ID, we should be saying user ID.user ID, which is not the best way to do it. So instead of fixing it here, let's fix it in the clerk dashboard. Right here where we customized our token, we can re-edit it one more time. And this time we can say user.public_metadata.user_ID. That way we're getting exactly what we need. We can click save. And now if we go back here and reload, you can see that now we only get the user ID and not an object. So now that we know that we're getting exactly what we need and passing it over to the event form, we can once again try to create a new post. Let's go to Evently. Let's reload it once again to ensure that we have a completely new empty slate with all of the changes we implemented. And let's add a new event. There we go. I sped up the process for you, and I'm gonna click Create while before opening this up and clicking Create. Our upload thing server is running. We're trying to upload the image. We get back the category ID and the organizer ID, and we were successfully redirected to another page. In this case, the event details page. It's fine that we got a 404 because we haven't yet implemented that page. As a matter of fact, let's do that now. And we can do that if we go to our app root events and then create a new ID like this. That's going to be for our details. And within it, we can create a new page.tsx. We can run RAFCE. And that's it. Now we have our page right here. So we have successfully been redirected to a proper page. And to fully verify that we have created an event, let's go to MongoDB Atlas and navigate over to our events, only to be greeted with the complete event in the database, with the organizer connected to its own user, the category connected to its own reference, and all the data right here. That's great. Now we have two different avenues we can continue working off of. We can create the event details page, or we can start fetching all the events on our homepage. What do you think we should do first? Well, since we are already redirected to the event details page, let's go ahead and code that first. That's going to look something like this, where we have all of this information here, the image, the title, the creator, and then all the related events as well. We'll be able to see the product of what we worked so hard to achieve. So let's close all of the tabs that we no longer need. And we just have our local host, our MongoDB Atlas, which we also don't need because now we know that the creation is working. And let's just make our local host look like the finished website. So we can get started with working on this page right here. To get started, we'll first have to make another call to our event actions to get all of the post details corresponding to that specific post. So let's quickly rename this to event details. And let's immediately head over to our actions, which is going to be under lib, actions, event actions. And here, below our create event, we can create a second event action called get event by ID. So export const get event by ID is equal to an async function that accepts an event ID of a type string. And you know the drill. We simply open up a try and catch block. In the error, we simply handle error right here. And in the try, we try to connect to our database. And then we just try to get the event by saying const event is equal to await event dot find by ID. And we pass over the event ID. And then, of course, we can say if there is no event, we can then throw a new error. But if there is one, we simply return a JSON parse, JSON stringify event. Now, this is not the end of it. That's because we have to populate the information about the creator. You see, if we only call this event, it's going to have a property of organizer that's just going to have the ID of that specific user. But instead of an ID, we want to get the actual user's name, such as this one right here. And instead of a category ID, we want to populate the category title. So to do that, we can create a new function that we're going to reuse across more of these actions. It's going to be called const populate event. It's going to be an async function that takes in a query of a type any and returns a query dot populate. So this is what we want to call dot populate, and we want to populate a path of organizer where a model is of a type user. So model is user, and we want to select what we want to populate in a string of ID, first name, and last name as well. We can do the similar thing to populate the category. So category, model is category, and we want to select the ID, and we don't have the first and last name here, but instead we simply have the name. And we want to import the category from models category. So this is how that looks like. We have the populate event, and now we just want to wrap the event that find by ID with the populate, which is going to provide us, as I said, not just the ID of the category or of the organizer, but rather their full names. Great. So now we're returning that right here, and we can call the get event by ID from our page. So to do that, let's collapse this just a bit. And right at the top, we can make this an async function. And here's the cool part. Notice that we are on a specific domain, /events, /, and then we have the entire ID of the event right here in our URL params. So how can we get access to those params? Well, Next.js makes it so easy. The only thing you have to do is say params, and then destructure the param you want to get. That param is going to have the same name as the name of the variable you added right here. In our case, that's the ID. And then you can say that this is of a type search param props, which we need to import from the types. Now that we have the ID, the only thing left for us to do is to get the actual event details by saying const event is equal to await get event by ID, and we pass in the ID. The get event by ID, of course, being the action we just created. It is so easy working in modern Next.js applications. You get the data from the server, and you immediately have it right here in your frontend, which is also going to be rendered on the server for optimization. Now, it looks like I misspelled something. I misspelled the path, so that's most likely going to happen here. If I look for it, maybe in the populate, yeah, it's supposed to be category. So if I spell it properly, that should be good. And just for good measure, let's just console log the event to see what data we're getting back. There we go. We're getting everything we need. As you can see, the organizer also includes the first and last name, and the category includes the name as well. So now that we have all of that data, let's simply create the presentation for it. We're going to wrap everything in a section. That section is going to have a class name equal to flex, justify-center, bg-primary-50, bg-dotted-pattern, and bg-contain. Then, right within it, we want to have a div, and that div is going to have a class name equal to grid, grid-calls-1, on medium devices, grid-calls-2, and on 2XL devices, max-w-7XL. We're just creating the layout for now. Within it, we want to show the event image, which of course we have to import the next image for, and we have to give it a source equal to event.image URL. We can also give it an alt tag of hero image. We can give it a width of about 1,000, as well as a height of about 1,000 as well. And then we also have to give it a class name of h-full, min-h-300 pixels like this, object-cover, and object-center. Now, if you notice this, our Next.js will try to protect us, saying that we cannot render an image from an unknown source. So we have to go to next.config.js and add the upload thing server to our list of secure image providers. So let's go to our next.config.js, And here we can say images. And then under domains, we can add an array of utfs.io. After this, we'll have to reload our application. So just run npm run dev one more time. And there we go. We can see the image, but we can see that image.domains is deprecated. Instead, we need to use remote patterns. So let's stay up to date, and let's say remote patterns is an array of an object where we have a protocol of HTTPS, a host name of utfs.io, in a string, of course, and finally, we have a port, which we don't have to define. So now, if we save it, it's not going to complain, and we can still see our image. Great. Now, going back below the image, we want to show all the additional information, which is going to be considered our details box. And I can see our app is still loading, so let's see what that is about. Once we modify the config, it has to recompile it. And in this case, it recompiled successfully. So right below the image, let's have a div that's going to have a class name equal to flex, w-full, flex-call, gap of 8, padding of 5, and on medium devices, padding of 10. This entire time, we're just working on creating the layout for what is yet to become this event details page. Right within that div, we want to have another div that's going to have a class name equal to flex, flex-call, and a gap of 6. Right within it, we can finally render our H2 that's going to render the first piece of data for our event besides the image, which is the event.title. Let's make it a bit more pronounced by giving it a class name of h2-bold. There we go. That's better. Now below this h2, let's also render a div that's going to have a class name equal to, and let's spell it properly, flex, flex-call, gap-3, on small devices, flex-row, and on small devices, items-center. Within it, we can show another div that's going to have a class name equal to flex and a gap of 3. And within it, we can show whether this event is free or if it has a price within a p tag. So there, we can say event.isFree. In that case, we can say free. Else, we can render the dollar amount and then the event price. In this case, it's going to be $100. Let's make it look a bit better by giving it a class name equal to p-bold-20, rounded-full, bg-green-500/10, padding x of 5, padding y of 2, and text green 700. There we go. That's better already. It makes it seem cheaper as it's green. And then we want to go one p tag below and add another p tag. This one is going to render the event.category.name, and we want to give it a class name equal to p-medium-16, rounded-full, bg-gray-500/10, padding x of 4, padding y of 2.5, and text-gray of 500. There we go. In this case, it just says AI, which is 2 letters, but it can also be longer. Then we want to exit just one div, and below it, create another p tag. This one is going to have a class name equal to p-medium-18, margin left of 2, margin top of 2, and on small devices, margin top of 0. There, we can say something like by, create a space like so, and then render a span element where we can render the event.organizer.firstname, and we can pair it with event.organizer.lastname as well. So if we save it, you can see Adrian at JS Mastery, and we can give this span a class name equal to text-primary-500. There we go. That's looking better. Now below it, we can render this buy ticket button, which for now, we're just gonna leave empty right here. If we go 1, 2 divs below, we can render the checkout button. But for now, let's finalize all the other details, such as the date, time, location, description, and more. We can do that by creating another div that's going to have a class name equal to flex-call, and a gap of 5. Then we can have another div within it that's going to have a class name equal to flex, gap of 2, and on medium devices, a gap of 3. And by the way, I want to take a moment to ask you, what do you think of these 3 dots hiding the class names? Do they make the coding easier, or do they make it much harder to watch what I'm doing? Please let me know in the comments down below, and I will revert back to not using this extension if that's what you prefer. Or if you prefer it, let me know and I'll keep using it. Now right here, we want to render an image. And this image is going to have a source equal to /assets, /icons, /calendar.svg with an alt tag of calendar, a width of about 32 pixels, and a height of 32 pixels as well. Finally, below that image, we can render a div that's going to have a p tag of format, date, and time coming from libutils, which we can call like this, and pass it the event.startDateTime. And this is going to be the date. So we can call the .dateOnly method on it. And below it, we're going to render another p tag with a class name equal to ml1 to create some spacing. And instead of date only, we're going to render the time only. We want to provide a dash and then some spacing in between, like this. And we want to duplicate it and render the format time only, but this time it's going to be end date time. Like this, end date time. If we save it, you should be able to see starting here, ending here. And if we compare it to the finished website, you can see how it should look like. So what we can do is we can provide a class name to this div, such as a p-medium of 16, on large devices p-regular of 20, flex, flex-wrap, and items-center. And now we can see Tuesday, December 19th, and we can see the time from and time to, but we might also want to add the date from. That will make sense, right? So let's try to make it make a bit more sense. We have the start time right here, or rather start date. Next to it, we can render the start time by copying this entire thing and placing it right below. Format date time, start date time, and then time only. And then below this, we can have another P that's going to render the same thing if we duplicate it. But this time, it's going to say end date time, date only, and time only. Then it's going to look like this. That makes a bit more sense. From December 19, 1225 to December 26, 1225. That is great. And in case you want to add a space here, you need to do it like so. Space. And space here. That is great. Finally, we can add all of the remaining details. So let's go 2 divs down and let's create another wrapper div that's going to have a class name equal to p-regular -20 flex items-center gap of 3. Then we want to have an image, and that image will have a source equal to /assets /icons /location.svg. We also want to give it an alt tag equal to, that's going to be location, with a width of 32 and a height of 32 as well. Right below it, we want to have a p tag that's going to render the event.location, And we can style it a bit by giving it a class name equal to p-medium-16, on large devices p-regular-20. If we save it and go back, you can see the online tag looks great. We can once again go 2 divs down and create another wrapper div that's going to have a class name equal to flex, flex-call, and a gap of 2. There, we can render a p tag that's going to have a class name equal to p-bold-20, text-gray-600. And we can say something like what you'll learn. There we go. Right below it, we can have another p tag that's going to have a class name equal to p-medium-16, and on large devices, p-regular-18. There, we can render the event.description. And right below it, we can duplicate this p tag. And on top of giving it a large regular 18, we can also truncate it and give it a text primary 500 as well as underline. And here we can render the event.url. So now if we save it and collapse our Visual Studio Code, you can see that this is looking great. We have our description and we have our URL. This is looking more like it. That's great. But now there are 2 additional things we have to do. The first one is to add a buy ticket button, which we're going to do later on once we start adding the Stripe integration, which is going to be quite exciting. And then the other one is rendering the related events. Since as of this moment, this is the only event that we have, we're not going to focus on adding related ones yet. We'll do that soon. But what do you say that now we finally go back to the homepage and display this new event that we worked so hard to create and to get on our platform? To do that, we can go all the way back to our homepage by navigating to Page under the root folder. And here we have our search and category filter, and below we can render all of our posts. So before we add the search and category filter, let's immediately render a new component called collection. It's going to be a self-closing component, which we have to add to our components shared, called collection.tsx, where we can run RAFCE, and we can immediately import it right from here. Make sure to import the collection from components. And there we go, you can see collection. Now it's our turn to pass everything we need to pass to this collection and then start displaying that data, similarly to what we are doing right here on our final deployed website, where we have our events listed one after another. So what we can do is we can first pass data equal to, that's going to be events. So first thing that we need, of course, is data, which is the data for the actual events. For now, I'm going to leave it as an empty array. We also want to pass an empty title, meaning what's going to be showing in case we don't have any events. We can say something like no events found. Then we can add empty state subtext, which is going to be something like, let's do come back later. We can also add a collection type equal to all events, because this collection is going to be reusable and we're going to reuse it for a couple of other things, one of which is the related events. If you pay close attention, you're going to notice that these related events are also a collection of reusable event cards, same that we use on our homepage. So we have to provide the correct collection type. We also can provide a limit, which we're going to provide later on. For now, we can leave it as 6. We need to provide which page we're on. For now, I'm going to leave it as 1. And we need to provide the total number of pages that we have. For now, I'm just going to hard code it to 2. All of this data has to properly be passed to the collection, which can then be accepted through props. So let's immediately define all of the variables we're passing. First, we have the data. Then we have the empty title. After that, we have the empty state subtext. We have the page, the total pages, which we can default to 0. We have the collection type, and we have the URL param name. More on that later. And all of these are going to be of a type collection props, which we have to define above by saying type collection props is equal to an object where data is of a type iEvent, so event interface, like this, and then an array of those events. The empty title is going to be a string. The empty state subtext is also going to be a string. Limit is going to be a number. Page is going to be a number or a string. Total pages is going to be optional, which we can denote by this question mark right here, of a type number. URL param name is also going to be optional and of a type string. And then the collection type is going to be optional of a type events underscore organized or my underscore tickets or all underscore events. So now we know exactly what we're accepting into our collection. And before we start coding it out, we have to get the event data. That's the thing we have to do. Because now, if we fix this empty type, there we go. Everything we're passing is good besides the data. It's empty right now. So right at the top of this page, let's go ahead and fetch all of the events we have created so far, which in our case will be this great GitHub Universe event. To start fetching our events, we can go to our event actions, which is right here within lib actions, event actions. And below the create event and get event by ID, we want to create another one. So let's do it by first duplicating our get event by ID, and let's rename it to get all events. This one is going to be even simpler. It will accept a couple of things as params. We want to get a query. We want to get a limit, which we can set to default to 6. The page we're currently on, as well as the category we are returning. And this is going to be of a type get all event params. Now, first things first, we connected the database, and then we want to implement all the queries before we actually go ahead and fetch the events. Now, before we start querying specific events based off of the title and category, let's first return all of the events by first specifying the events query. Const events query is equal to event.find. And here later on, we can pass our conditions. For now, we're going to declare those conditions above as an empty object. But soon enough, we're going to add the title, the query string, the category, and more to allow for sorting and filtering. Now, we also want to call the .sort on it and sort it by created at in the descending order. So the new ones are going to appear on top. We want to call the .skip, and we want to skip it by a specific amount, for now 0. And then we want to add a limit of how many we want to return. We can limit it by the limit, which is 6 by default. Then we can say const events is equal to await populate event, to which we pass the events query. Now, it would also be good to know the total number of events that we are returning. That way we can implement pagination. So we can say const events count is equal to await event.count document based off of these conditions. Finally, instead of returning just this JSON parse and JSON stringify, we can return a full object where the data is equal to JSON parse and JSON stringify events, and then the total pages is going to be equal to math.ceil. So we want to get the top number of the events count divided by the limit. And now we are returning all the events. So now let's go back to our current version of the application, and let's try to fetch those events right here. We can do that by saying const events is equal to await get all events. And of course, we have to import it from get all events from lib actions. Now you can see that we have to make this function async. So async function home. And this get all events requires us to pass a couple of params. It needs a query, which we have to define. So what is that query? Well, for now, it's going to be an empty string because we're trying to get all, but soon enough, it's going to be the query we're going to modify based off of the search right here. Then after the query, we also have to pass a category, which is also going to be empty for now. We also have a page, which is going to be equal to, let's just do 1 for now. And then we have a limit, which can be set to something like 6. And this is how we get all the events. So for now, let's simply console log the events and let's see if they're coming back. This entire page is a server page. So if we're getting anything back, we should be able to see it right here within our console. And indeed we do. We see data with an array of one object where we see our GitHub Universe 2023 event and the total page number of 1, which is exactly what we expected. So with that in mind, we can now pass these events right here to our collection by saying events data. Now we can move into our collection and we can start implementing the look and feel for what are yet to become these cards right here. So to get started, we can immediately return an empty React fragment, and then within it, check if we have something within our data by checking the data.length is greater than 0. If that is the case, we can return a div, and else right here, we can return another div that's going to have an empty state. So in here, we can simply do something like h3 that's going to render the empty title and a p tag that's going to render the empty state subtext. Now, we are not going to be able to see it because we do have one event. So if I do data 0 and then dot title, we should be able to see it right here, GitHub Universe 2023. But if we for a second imagined that this requires at least 2 events to show, then we can see no events found, come back later. Let's style this error message or just the no events message a bit better by giving this div a class name equal to flex-center, wrapper, min-h-200 pixels, w-full, flex-call, gap of 3 between the elements, rounded -14 pixels, like this, bg-gray-50, like this, padding y of 28, and text-center. There we go, that's better. Let's also style the h3 by giving it a class name of p-bold-20, and on medium devices, h5-bold. There we go. And a bit smaller, class name of p-regular-14 for our empty p tag. Great. Now we can get back to reality because we know we have one event and we can start creating this wonderful card for each event. First, let's create a wrapper div for all of these events by giving it a class name equal to grid w-full grid-calls-1 gap of 5. On small devices, we want to show 2 per column, so we can say grid-calls-2. On large devices, grid-calls-3, and on extra large devices, a gap of 10. That's not going to change too much right now, but as soon as we render the data within a UL, an unordered list, that's going to have a class name equal to grid. So we're going to render these cards within a grid with a w-full grid-calls-1, a gap of 5, and it looks like I confused those 2 class names. Whatever we added here in the above grid should go into the UL. So we can just copy it and paste it here. That was my bad. But the div, that's the wrapper, should have a class name of flex-call because on top we're going to have the elements, but on the bottom we're going to have the pagination, the item center to center it, and a gap of 10. So now we have the styles both for the UL and for the div. Finally, we are ready to render the elements by saying data.map, where we get each individual event. And for each event, we don't automatically return something, but rather we have to check whether we are on the events organized or my tickets, because based off of that, we'll be able to render some additional things within each card. So we can say const has order link. And that's only the case if our collection type is triple equal to events underscore organized. Similarly, we can say const hide price. And that's going to be the case if the collection type is equal to my tickets, because then we already know the price. Now that we have those two additional pieces of information, we can return an li that has a key equal to event._id with a class name equal to flex and justify -center. Finally, within it, we want to render our new component called card. So let's go ahead and create this card within shared components by creating a new card.tsx component, inside of which we can run rafce. Doing that, we can go back in here and we can render the self-closing card component, which we need to import from /card. Now we can see just the card, but to that card, now we want to pass the entire event by saying event is equal to event, has order link is equal to has order link, and the hide price is equal to hide price. Finally, we are ready to go into the card and start implementing it. We already know which props does this card take in. It's going to be the event itself, the has order link, and the hide price. And that is equal to card props type, which we have to define above by saying type card props is equal to an object where the event is of a type I as an interface event coming from models event model, has order link, which is going to be optional of a type boolean, and hide price optional of a type boolean. So now we can start creating what is yet to become our card by first wrapping everything in a div and giving it a class name equal to group relative flex min-h-380 pixels, w-full, max-w-400 pixels, flex-call, overflow-hidden, rounded-xl, bg-white, shadow-md, transition-all, on hover, shadow-lg, on medium devices, min-h-438 pixels. A lot of classes, but we're going to end up with a nice looking card. We can now make that entire card clickable by creating a new Next.js link right within it, coming from next link. It's going to have an href pointing to /event._id. It's also going to have some unique styles. So let's put this in a new line and let's give it a style property equal to background image. That's going to have the value of URL event.image URL. So if we save it, we cannot see anything, but if we add a class name equal to flex-center, flex-grow, bg-gray of 50, bg-cover, bg-center, and a text gray of 500, you can see this great looking image. Then later on, we have to figure out if we are the creator of the event. If we are, we can add some additional functionalities such as update or delete buttons to our event. For now, I'm just going to say is event creator, and then we can implement it soon enough. But for now, I just want to add everything else to our card details. And that's going to go below our link, because this link is going to be a self-closing link that simply renders the image. Then we have the isEventCreator, and then below that link, we have another link that has the same href. So let's copy the start of this link and paste it here. It's a link with an href of /events/event ID, but within here, we're going to show our details of the card, not just the image. So let's give the link a class name equal to flex min-h-230 pixels, that's the height of the details, flex-col, so they appear one below another, and a gap of 3, a padding of 5, and on medium devices, a gap of 4. Within here, we can have one more div that's going to have a class name equal to flex, gap of 2, and within it, we want to have a span. This span is going to say event.isFree. If that is the case, then we can render free, else we can render the $sign and then event.price, which is going to look something like this. And now we can start seeing it right here. Let's compare it to the finished card. There we go. This is how it looks like. So we are getting there step by step. Let's style this span element by giving it a class name of p-semibold-14, w-min, rounded-full, bg-green-100, padding x of 4, padding y of 1, and text-green-60. There we go. So now we have a nice looking pill-like shape. Below this span, we can add a p tag that's going to render the event.category.name. We can also spice it up a bit by giving it a class name equal to p-semibold-14, w-min, rounded-full, bg-gray 500/10, padding x of 4, padding y of 1, and text-gray-500. There we go. That's better already. Now, this will only show if we're not hiding the price. So we can wrap this entire div with a flex of 2 in a conditional rendering by saying if not hide price, then and render this. Else, we simply don't want to show it, so we can close it right here. In this case, we do have the price, so we can show it. We now want to go below this and render a p tag that's going to render the format date time, to which we pass the event dot start date time, and then we render the date time by saying dot date time. That's going to give us the correct date and time when the event is starting. We can style it a bit by giving it a class name equal to p-medium-16, p-medium-18, and text-gray-500. We can now go below and render another p tag, and this is going to be for the event.title. This, of course, has to be much bigger, so we can give it a class name equal to p-medium-16, on medium devices, p-medium-20, line-clamp-2, meaning that it can extend over 2 lines, flex-1, and text-black. If we save it, that's looking good. And finally, we need to know who is organizing the event. So if we go below this p tag, we can create another div that's going to have a class name equal to flex-between and w-full. And here we can render a p tag that's going to have a class name equal to p-medium-14, on medium devices p-medium-16, and a text gray of 600. There we can render our organizer name by doing it like this: event dot organizer dot first name, and right after it, event dot organizer dot last name. There we go. That's looking good. And then we want to figure out if we have the order link, meaning have we bought this event already? So right below this p tag, we can say if has order link, then display a link that's going to have an href pointing to /orders, question mark, event ID is equal to event dot underscore ID. We can also give it a class name equal to flex and a gap of 2. And if we do have a link, if we have purchased this, we can render a p tag that's going to say order details, give it a class name equal to text-primary-500. And finally, we can show an arrow to move to our order by rendering an image, which has to be imported from next image, with a source of /assets /icons /arrow.svg. We can also give it an alt tag of search, a width of 10, and a height of 10 as well. We cannot see it right now because we're looking at this event on the home page. We haven't bought it, but if we buy an event, then we'll see a link that's going to lead us to the order details page. But on the other hand, we have created this event. So we need to fill out this part. Is event creator? In this case, we are. So to be able to figure that out, we have to create some additional logic right here in this component. And that is, we have to figure out if the user ID of the user that is currently logged in is the same user ID of the organizer of that event. And we can do that by saying const session claims is equal to auth, which has to be imported from clerk next.js. Then from session claims, we can get the user ID by saying const user ID is equal to session claims dot user ID as string. And then we can create a simple Boolean variable, const is event creator. And that's going to be a check where we check if user ID is triple equal to event.organizer.id, but we can call a .toString on it because sometimes the ID is the MongoDB object ID, and we want it to be a string because we're doing a string comparison. Now, based off of this variable right here, we can check if is event creator and if not hide price, then we want to show something. And that something is a div that's going to render a link that's going to have an href pointing to /events /event._id /update. Within that link, we can render an image that's going to have a source equal to /assets /icons /edit.svg with an alt tag of edit and a width of 20 and a height of 20. If we save it, this one we should be able to see. There we go, because we are the creator. Let's just position it a bit better by giving this div a class name equal to absolute right -2 top -2 flex -col gap of 4 rounded -xl bg-white p-3 shadow-sm and transition-all. That's going to move it to the top right. Also, there should be a little delete confirmation that pops up in case we want to delete it. And for that, we're going to create a new component right below this link called delete confirmation. So let's go to shared components and create a component called delete confirmation dot tsx, where we can run rafce and simply call it right here by running delete confirmation. and importing it from /delete confirmation. And the only thing we have to pass is the event ID equal to event._id. Now, if we go into it, we can start implementing it. And this component is just using a simple SHA-CN alert dialog, which we have used before, if you remember, when creating the category on the event create page. For that reason, just to save us some time from writing the same code, I'm going to provide you the code for the delete confirmation in the README down below. Find it and paste it right here. Then it should look something like this. We're using a lot of these different alert dialog options, and we're doing the same thing as before with the alert dialog trigger. We're asking, are we sure we want to delete? And then on click, we're calling the delete event option. Here we can say deleting. Now, you're going to notice that if we save it, there's one thing that's not imported right here, which is the delete event server action. It's saying that we have it right here, but we haven't yet created it. And creating this delete event action cannot be any simpler. Let's start by copying our get event by ID and pasting it below. By now, you should already get a good idea of how we create these actions, because they all follow a similar pattern. We first create and export a basic async function. We give it a name of delete event. Here, we can accept some props, such as event ID, or path if needed, and then we can define the type for those, called delete event params. We connect to the database, or we handle some errors, and after we're connected to the database, we try to do something with it, and that is either fetch some data, which is what we're doing here, or delete something by calling the event dot find by ID and delete, to which we have to pass the event ID. Now we're not getting back the event, we're getting back the deleted event, and we can say if there is a deleted event, then we want to revalidate a path. This means that we want to clear the cache and refetch all the events because the event's structure has changed. And we don't need to return anything in this case. Simple as that. And I can notice we also have some errors right here on our right side. We're going to fix that soon. But I want to say, I hope by now you get the idea of writing these server actions and why they're so useful. It's because you can write basic JavaScript code, async functions, and then have proper try and catch error handling, and immediately interact with the database, and then simply call those actions right here within your code. Throughout building the rest of this video, there's going to be a few more actions which we'll have to create. But since procedure is the same, I want to give you the entire event.actions.ts file. So go to the same README where you used to copy the code from before and just paste it right here. It's going to contain a couple more actions like get related events by category. We're going to also have get events by user. We have the get all events, which we have done already, but here we added the conditions. We also have the delete. We have the update, get event by ID, create event, and finally, the helper functions. I hope you can notice the structure and the way in which we're creating these actions and using them within our code. And don't worry, whenever I use some of these actions in the future code, we're going to go over it, expand our action, and we're going to go through the functionality together. Now, with that said, let's close our event actions. And let's figure out why this error is occurring. Unsupported server component type, undefined. If we go back to the card, it looks like we're importing the delete confirmation, but we should be importing it not as a default component, but rather as a named import. So just delete the import and import it once again. When you do that and go back, you can now see both delete and edit. And delete opens up this nice looking dialog. And let's check out if the edit button works. Right now, it's going to point us to a 404, which means that our edit route has not properly been set up. And to set it up, let's see what we have done so far. We did have the update page, if I remember correctly, but it is under the create folder, which doesn't make too much sense. So this update folder should have been within the ID because we need to know which page or which post or which event are we updating. So as soon as I move it here, if we click edit right here, you can notice that now it points to our form that we created, but it says update event instead of create event, which is great. I told you we'll be able to reuse this component, and now is the time. But of course, if you're updating an event, we don't want you to retype everything from scratch, do we? We want the program to autofill all the data and for you to change what you need to change. Only that and nothing more. So let's quickly close all of the currently open files and let's go to our event form. Let's figure out how we can not only implement the create, but also edit. And of course, autofill all the default values that already belong to this now already existing event. To do just that, we have to head to our update page, which is going to be a page under update ID right here. And this time, opposed to passing just the create type, we want to pass the existing event that we want to update. And to do that, we can fetch the event because now we have the get event by ID action, which we created for the event details page, and we can reuse it here. Another benefit of using server actions. We can do that by saying const event is equal to await get event by ID, and now we can pass the event ID, which is coming through params. If you notice right here at the top, we see event and then an ID, and we get access to it by destructuring params and then destructuring the ID from those params, and that's of a type update event params. We also have to make this async because we're using await, and now we get an event that we can simply pass over right here. Event is equal to event. Now to update our event, we also need to figure out who is updating it, and I believe we have done this already for the create page. Let me see. There we go. The way we did it is we got the user ID from session claims, so we can do the same exact thing here. Let's copy it. Let's put it right here. Import auth from clerk next.js, and then we get the user ID. Finally, we can pass it right here by saying user ID is equal to user ID. Now that works, but it's complaining about params a bit, saying that property params does not exist on type update event params. That's because this was supposed to be update event props, not params, which we have to define right here. Type update event props, where we get params with an ID of string. But still, our TypeScript is complaining about the event we're passing in. It's saying that type update and event is not assignable to intrinsic attributes event form props. Interesting. Let's dive into the event form and figure out why that is the case. Yes, of course, that's the case because so far we have never passed an actual event into the form before. We have been just creating new events, but now we're passing the event, and we can also pass the event ID equal to event._ID. Now we're passing everything we need to update our form, or rather update our event. So let's go into the form and accept all of those new props by saying event and event ID, where the event is going to be an optional prop because we're not passing it with the create form. It's going to be of a type I event, which we have to import, and event ID, which is also optional, of a type string. And now nobody is complaining and it's looking good. So finally, let's utilize those existing event values to fill in our fields. We can do that by setting the initial values right here. See that initial values are equal to event default values, but we can check if we have access to the event and if the type is triple equal to update. In that case, we can return an object that looks like this. Within this object, we can define all of the properties of an event. Or rather, even more simply, we can just set it to be an event. Let's put this in a new line so it's easier to understand, and let's save it. If you save and reload, you can see that we have invalid time value. That's because we have to wrap the start and end date time into new dates. So instead of passing the entire event, we can pass the event, but then update the start date time to be equal to new date, and then pass the event start time, and do the same exact thing with the end date time, where we wrap it in a new date constructor, like so. So now if we save it, you can see all of our values are pre-filled. We are allowed to change them. For example, GitHub Universe 2024. We can even change the category. Maybe this time we fully want to spell out artificial intelligence and click add. That works. And let's say that the first event was amazing, so the price increased to something like $999. And of course, this would also have to be 2024. So let's modify the year. Now, before we click update, we have to notice that this is not going to work. Why is that? Well, because the type is equal to update. And here in the submit, we're checking if the type is equal to create, but we have no check if the type is equal to update. So let's do that right away. We can do that by first duplicating the create right below, collapsing it, and then say if type is triple equal to update. We first want to check if we have an event ID, or rather check if we don't have it. So if there is no event ID, in that case, we can call a router.back to go to the previous page and just exit out of the function. If we do have an event ID, on the other hand, we want to call the update event, which we have to import from libactions, say updated event. The first parameter we pass is going to be the user ID. The second one is the event itself, where we spread out all the values. We pass the updated image URL, and also we need to pass the underscore ID, which is the actual event ID. Finally, the path to revalidate is not profile, because after update, we don't go to the profile, we go to the event detail page. So we have to say event ID, and this is of course going to be dynamic. Finally, if we do have an updated event, we want to reset our form and push to /events and then updated event.id. And now we need to reload the page and click update. If that happens, we have new values, but just to be sure, let's reload. And there we go, they remain, which means that they have been saved to the database. This is great. Everything is starting to make a lot of sense. Our beautiful homepage, where now we can see the events. By the way, this is not looking too good. We have to make sure that this extends in one line. Then we have the update form, where we can update the event or even create a new event. Then we have the dialog for the deletion, and then we have this beautiful details page. Everything is looking better and better. And don't forget, we have phenomenal account management using Clerk. Now let's quickly fix this up, because on the final version, even if we have something longer, it should fit in one line. I think this is the best place to use Tailwind's line clamp. So let's simply search for it. That's going to be within the card component, where we are rendering the category, which should be right here. And we can give it a class name of line-clamp-1. If we save it, it's going to make it fit in one line. So this is looking great. Now, just to verify that our collection is working, let's go ahead and add a second event. It's better to have more. Let's copy one of the events from here, such as this one, JSM Nexus. But I'm going to name it as a real event. I'm going to name it Ultimate Next 14 workshop. This is a special workshop we're doing for people that have purchased the Ultimate Next 14 course. We're going to dive deep into server actions and everything else you need to know to become a top 1% Next.js developer. Of course, this is going to be related to Next.js. To get the description, we can go to the real event page, Next.js for developers, because this indeed is a real event that I'm holding as a part of React Day Berlin 2023 workshop. It's an advanced Next.js workshop where we dive into topics that empower React.js developers to get the full power of Next.js. React server components, Edge and Node.js runtimes, server-side rendering, caching strategies, a lot of advanced stuff. So let's copy this. That's looking good. And let me use this photo right here. Let's also add a real link. I'm going to add a link to our course page. The date is going to be really soon. Let's add it somewhere around here. Make sure that it is in the future. The URL can be here as well. And in this case, let's make it free. Finally, let's create the event. Oh, there we go. Our Zod validation is working. The description must be less than 400 characters. So let's try to cutting it up a bit. We still have 2 more. Looks like there's a lot of things we want to cover. Let's just cut the last one out and a bit more. And there we go. We're good. I always try to cover as much as possible with every single workshop, video, or course we make. We got redirected back to this details page, which is looking good, but is it looking the same as in this one? It seems like it's cutting it here, but it's not that it's being cut. It's that we are yet to implement the related events functionality, which right now is going to be super simple because we already have the actions for it. And we already have created this collections component where it simply shows all the other events. So with that said, let's implement the get related events. We can close all of the files we have currently open, and we can go to the details page, which is going to be under ID. So that's specifically events ID. And remember, somewhere here at the bottom, we have specified that we have to add the recommended events. That's right here below the section. That means that we have to wrap the entire thing in a React fragment. So let's wrap it. And let's also close it properly at the end and add a new section for our recommended posts. This section is going to have a class name equal to wrapper, margin Y of 8 to create some spacing, flex -col, gap of 8, and on medium devices, gap of 12. When I say related, in this case, we can call it something like events from the same organizer. That's the idea. So let's add an h2, give it a class name equal to h2-bold, and say something like related events. We can go back to the home page and copy this collection that I have created and paste it right here below the h2. First, we have to import collection from components shared collection. And then instead of events, we have to pass related events, which we can fetch right here at the top of our page. So at the top, let's simply say const related events is equal to await get related events by category. And in there, we have to pass the category ID of a event.category ._ID. We can pass the event ID as well. As I said, we can compare based off of the category or the organizer. And then also the page, which is going to be coming from search params. So here we can say search params. And if we are on a specific page, we can say search params dot page as string. So the pagination will be working soon flawlessly as well. That's going to give us access to related events, which now we can pass right here, related events dot data. If we save it, you can see that we see no events. That's because we have no other events with the category Next.js. I made a mistake here. It's not events from the same organizer. It's the events with the same category. In case you want to modify it, just go to this action and try to implement from the same organizer. In this case, I'm going to keep the same category because it makes more sense. But just to test it out, let's try to modify the category of one of our existing events. For example, the GitHub universe. Go here, or rather, let's go here and edit. And let's change it to Next.js, update. And there we go, the related events appears, and we can now navigate between those related events. Please tell me, is this not the best thing ever? When you form a couple of routes and when you allow those routes to just navigate one to another. That way, it feels that your app is much more functional because you have the home page, you have here, you go here. It feels that you can just keep going and explore this great application. So what do you say? What is the next thing that we can implement? Well, I believe that my profile is waiting for us. Let's turn this 404 into a page. And we can do that by going all the way here and creating a new route using Next.js file-based routing. That's going to be under root, create a new folder called profile. And then within it, create a new page.tsx. And for now, just run rafce and say profile page. If we do that, you can now see a great looking profile page. Believe it or not, building out the profile page will be much easier than what you might think. Here, we're going to show my tickets, and then below, we're going to show my events organized, which is all the same thing. We're going to reuse the same collection component. Yep, that's right, but we're going to feed it different data. Below is going to be the data for the events we have organized, and above is going to be the collection for the events that we have purchased. So with that in mind, let's go all the way back here and let's start implementing the profile page. To implement our profile page, we can get started by wrapping everything in a React fragment. And that's because our profile page is going to consist of a couple of different things. Two, to be specific. The my tickets, which you can write right here. My tickets. And then below it, we're going to have something known as events organized. So these are the events that we, as the user, have organized. Let's start with the first section, which is my tickets, which is going to be a section that's going to have a class name equal to bg-primary-50, bg-dotted-pattern, bg-cover, bg-center, padding y of 5, and on medium devices, padding y of 10. That's going to give it this background where we can enter some text. But before that, let's create another div that's going to have a class name equal to wrapper, flex, items-center, justify-center, on small devices, justify-between. Right in there, we want to show our h3. This h3 is going to say my tickets, and we can give it a class name equal to h3-bold, text-center, and on small devices, text-left. There we go. That's looking good. Right below it, we can render a button, which we can import from components UI button. It's going to say as child because we're going to display a link as a child property, a link imported from next link that's going to say explore more events. And it's going to point to /hash events. There we go. Now let's style it a bit by giving this button a class name equal to button, hidden, and on small devices, flex. So we don't have to show it on mobile, but if we grow larger, we can show it on the right side. Right below this section, we want to have another section that's going to have a class name equal to wrapper margin y of 8. And here we want to render a collection. So let's copy the collection we have in our homepage, which is right here, and let's paste it there within the section. First, we need to import the collection from components shared collection. We're going to keep the events empty for now. This is going to break our app, but we're fine with that. We want to change the empty title to no event tickets purchased yet. Empty state is going to be something like no worries. Plenty of exciting events to explore. And this is going to not be all events collection type. It's going to be my underscore tickets type. The limit is going to be only 3. The existing page will modify later. The URL param name is equal to orders page. And the total pages we can modify later. Now, the next thing I want to do is just comment out this entire section entirely. So now we can see our website again. And I want to copy this entire initial section we have created and paste it below this section under events organized. Everything is going to be the same. We're going to have a section, a div, and then an H3 that's going to say events organized. The link is going to point to create new event, and we can change the link to point to /events/create. And here we want to render again a section where we can map over our collection. So below this section, we paste yet another section where this time we're going to say something like no events have been created yet. And we can say go create some now. There we go. This is going to be events underscore organized. Limit is going to be 6. Page is going to be 1 for now. And URL params is events page. There we go. So now we have the boilerplate structure set up, but what we have to do is fetch the events, both for my tickets and events organized. We haven't yet implemented the functionality to purchase or buy the tickets for specific events. So let's skip the my tickets for now, but let's make the events organized work. Because that's simple. We just have to figure out who is the creator of these events and then fetch it. We already know how to get the ID of a specific user. We have to say const session claims is equal to auth, like this, which we import from clerk next.js. And then we say const user ID is equal to session claims dot user ID as string. Finally, we can fetch organized events by saying const organized events is equal to await. We have to make this async, of course. That's going to be get events by user, which we need to import from actions. And to it, we can pass a user ID and a page, which for now can be set to 1. So now we have the organized events, and let's actually bring back the collection and pass the organized events.data. And this is the only thing it takes to actually show our cards. This is great. And considering that we're on the profile page, you can also see that now the order details appear. But we do have 3 errors though. It says hydration failed because the initial UI does not match what was rendered on the server. Expected server HTML to contain a matching div in an anchor tag. Okay, this means that some anchor tags are not working as they should be. It could be these 2 links. We have a button that has as child property. We can also give it the size of LG. I think it is a bit too small if we notice it right here. That's a bit bigger. And then it has a class name of button hidden on small devices flex. Within it, we have a link pointing to /events/create. This is good. Let's look into the other button above. This one also can have a size equal to LG, and the link is pointing to /events. So if we reload, once again, we get those same errors. It is a hydration error, the most common error in Next.js. And if you click right here, you can see that the React hydration error most commonly happens if you do incorrect nesting of HTML tags, such as putting a P instead of a P, a div instead of a P, or so on. So to fix it, let's go to our collection and let's navigate to our card right here. You're going to notice that here we have a div that's wrapping our link. And if you scroll a bit down, you can see that this link is wrapping many different things, such as p tags and more. What we want to do is remove the href from this link and simply make it a div. There we go. So now it's a div with this class name. Now, of course, we have to bring back that link somewhere. So we can bring it back once we click on the event title, which is going to be right here. There we go. We have a p tag, and we can wrap that p tag inside of a link. So we can do a link, put this p tag inside of it, and then give this link an href of /events/event._id. Now, if we save it, now we of course have to close the div tag as well and not have it named link. But if we did that and go back, you're going to notice that the error is gone. And if you click on a link, it still points to the correct page. So this is great. We no longer have errors. Now, if we close all of these pages and get back to where we were, we have successfully implemented the half of the profile page where we have the events organized. But now is the time that we dive into the entire ticketing system of our application, a completely new functionality. We don't yet have these order details. As you can see, orders page is empty, and we don't yet have the ability to purchase somebody else's tickets. So if we go right here to the deployed evently and check out a specific event, such as this one, we can see that we can also make the tickets unavailable. But in case they are available, we can click buy a ticket. And then we're going to be greeted with this entire mobile responsive Stripe interface where we can purchase it. And then once we purchase it, which we can do by typing just the default Stripe card, let's do that right here. And enter my name, such as JS Mastery. And we also have to do email, click pay. You can notice that now we have 2 tickets. But the real magic happens once you are the organizer and somebody else purchases your ticket, because then you have access to the completely different UI where you can see the emails of all of the people that have purchased your events. So for that reason, let's go ahead and get started with implementing this entire buy ticket functionality. We can do that by going back to our homepage and then clicking on a specific event that we didn't create. In this case, I'm logged in with JS Mastery, Adrian JS Mastery, and this event was created by Adrian JS Mastery. So what I need to do now to be able to purchase the ticket is to log in with a different account. So I'm going to sign out and I'm going to log in again. This time I did it with my other JavaScript Mastery email. And if I go here, now since we're a guest and not a creator, you can see that by the name that we have right here, we should be able to see a Buy Now button. So let's head to the details page, which is this Events ID page. Let's scroll up all the way where we have a comment that we added for ourselves that says Checkout button. Inside of here, we're going to make a call to our own component. So let's create it. New file called checkout button.tsx, where we can for now run REFCE. We can immediately use that button right here by calling it as a self-closing component, checkout button, and deporting it at the top. We're going to pass one thing to it. We're going to pass the entire event so we know what we are buying. Of course, we have to go into the checkout button component and accept that event right away by saying event is of a type event event, as in interface event. There we go. We can also immediately figure out if the event has been completed. Has it been closed? And we can do that by saying const closed event is equal to new date event dot start date time is lower than new date. Or we can also use end date time because we can maybe still participate if it hasn't ended. If that is the case, the event has closed. So a better name for this variable would be has event finished. There we go. Also, we need to know who is purchasing the event. So let's immediately get access to the user. Now, in this case, we won't use the claims to get the user ID to know who is purchasing it, because this button is going to be a client component. So we can immediately define it as client, or rather use client, and we can use the const user is equal to use user coming from clerk next.js. That's going to give us access to the user ID by saying const user ID is equal to user dot public metadata dot user ID as string. There we go. Now we have everything we need to create this button. So let's first wrap everything in a div that's going to have a class name equal to flex items-center and a gap of 3. Right within it, we're going to say that we cannot buy past events. So here we can add a check, doing something like if has event finished. In that case, we can render a p tag saying, sorry, tickets are no longer available. There we go. And else, what we can do is just render the button. So for now, let's wrap it in an empty React fragment and say button. Now, if we save this, you can see checkout button. And now it's going to say button. I also noticed I have this C right here, so let's quickly remove it. There we go. And in this case, looks like the event is not in the past because we are right here seeing the button and not seeing this p tag. Still, let's just style it by giving it a class name of p-2 and text-red-400. Great. Now, to purchase an event, we need to be logged in, which is once again where clerk comes to be really handy. We can use their signed out component to figure out if the user is signed out. In that case, we can render a button. And of course, we have to import this from clerk next.js. And then this button is going to render a link. And that link is going to have an href pointing to /sign-in. And it's going to say get tickets. Of course, we have to import the link from next link and the button from UI button. Since the button is rendering a link, it can have the as child property and a class name equal to button, rounded-full, and also it can have a size of LG. Now, if we save it, we cannot see anything yet because we are signed in. So let's render some code if we are signed in. In that case, we can use another one of the clerk utility components called signed in, which we can import from clerk next.js. And there, if we are signed in, we're going to render another component of ours where we're going to have the entire checkout. So let's call it checkout.tsx, run rafce, and then simply call it right here, checkout. And to that checkout, we want to pass the entire event. And we also want to pass the user ID equal to user ID so we know who is checking out. So now if we go to checkout, or just if we save this. So now if we import checkout from /checkout, you can see it right here. And if I open this page in the incognito mode, you can see that now we're not logged in, but we can still see the event. We can still see the homepage and everything, but we need to log in to be able to purchase it, which is amazing. But if we already are logged in that case, we can just see the checkout. So let's head to the checkout and let's implement it. The checkout is also going to start with a button, but it's going to utilize Stripe functionalities. So let's create it as a form that's going to have an action equal to on checkout. And this on checkout is a function that we have to create by saying const on checkout is equal to an async callback function, where for now we can simply console log checkout. There we go. And we can also do it as a method is equal to post. Now that we have a form, we can have a button within it, and that button has to be imported from UI button. Now, this button needs to know whether to say buy event or get event for free. So let's first get all the event information from props by defining it right here. Event and user ID is of types. Event is iEvent, user ID is string. And we have to import iEvent from database models. Now this button can say if event.isFree, then we can say something like get ticket, else we can say buy ticket. There we go. If we save it, in this case you can see get ticket because this one is free. But if we go back and head to our GitHub universe, you can see in this case it says buy ticket because this one has a price. Let's also give it a type equal to submit, a role equal to link because it's going to link us to the checkout, a size of LG, and a class name equal to button on small devices w-fit. There we go. That's more like it. Now, the last thing we have to do is bring Stripe into the picture. To start setting up Stripe, you can go to stripe.com and then click sign in or start now. Once you're in, you'll be redirected to your dashboard. What's really important is for you to turn on the test mode. So this toggle has to be on because right now we're testing our application and not publishing it in a real environment. Once you're here, you can then visit this Stripe documentation page. It's going to be in the same README where you found all of the other code blocks. I gotta say, Stripe has by far one of the best documentation pages out there. Everything is nicely sorted out. They have different examples, and every single example has a full app as well as instructions, and then also the full code block. And if you go over the steps, you can see exactly what each part of the code does. Not to mention that they have specific React and also Next.js documentation pages, which is amazing. So with that said, let's implement it. We're gonna set up a checkout component. First, we have this pages index.js. In our case, that's going to be our checkout page. And we have already done most of this, if you think about it. We have a button, but the last thing we need is to actually load up Stripe. So let's import these few first lines right here, and we can paste it right here. So we have the load Stripe and then Stripe promise. We also need this use effect, so we can put it right here in our component. So once we are redirected, this is going to check what's happening. Is it a success or is it canceled? So let's just import use effect right from the top, coming from React. And finally, we have a checkout button, which we have already added. Here, we can see that we're calling the next public Stripe publishable key, and we didn't yet add that to our envs. So here, if you click env, you'll get everything you need to copy with your exact keys being pulled from your dashboard. So let's simply copy this, go to our .env.local, and paste it below. Also, later on, we'll have to set up our Stripe webhook secret. We're gonna do that soon. For now, it's important that we have these two. Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to install Stripe at Stripe.js. So let's simply copy this, and then in our other terminal, run npm install, and then paste at stripe/stripe-js. That's going to give us all the imports we need. And we are going to have our own Stripe promise. There we go. It got installed and no longer do we have an error. Here, it's complaining that maybe this is not going to be there. So just to remove that TypeScript error, we can add an exclamation mark at the end. And I don't believe we'll need to use this Stripe promise. We're just setting it up. So we simply need to call load Stripe once. There we go. Now, the most important thing is what's going to happen once we actually check out. And we can deal with that right here on the onCheckout function. Here, we want to form our order by saying const order is equal to an object where we have the event title equal to event.title, event ID equal to event._ID, price equal to event.price, is free equal to event.isFree, and buyer ID equal to the user ID. Now that we have this order, we need to pass it into a new server action we're about to create. So let's say await checkout order, to which we're going to pass the order. This checkout order, as I said, is going to be a server action right here within the lib actions, and we're going to create a new file called order.actions.ts. We can immediately make it a use server. And you already know the drill. We have to run export const checkout order is equal to an async function that accepts the order of a type checkout order params. And here we can have a try and catch block. In the error, we can simply throw the error. And we have to fill this in to make it an arrow function. And then here, we can start processing our Stripe payment. Before that, let's just import this checkout order within our checkout. There we go. And we just need to ensure that the order has everything it needs to have. Right now, it looks like it doesn't. So if I go back here, we need to make sure that this is checkout order params, which it is. And that means that we need event title, ID, price, is free, and the buyer ID. And what are we passing? It says that the types of property price are incompatible. So let's check out what our I-event is saying. It's saying that the price can be optional, but it cannot. We need to have it even if an event is free. So if we fix this, now it's not going to complain about the price that we're passing through. Now let's form this order action. The code for that is going to be right here. We need to create a new Stripe session, and we essentially can copy everything that is within this try block right here. There we go. So let's copy it and paste it right here. We're creating a Stripe session. But before we do that, we have to load Stripe up by using this line right here, which we can put right here at the top of the try. It's going to say const Stripe is equal to new Stripe, like this, to which we pass the process.env.stripe secret key. And Stripe has to just be imported from Stripe. So let's run npm install Stripe. There we go. And then we'll be able to import this constructor right here at the top. And then once this is installed, we can import the Stripe constructor at the top. Let's see. Import Stripe. Coming from Stripe. There we go. Here we also need to add that exclamation mark. Now we have our Stripe instance. Let's also form the price by saying const price is equal to if order.isFree, then the price is a number 0, else we turn the order price into a number and multiply it by 100, because I believe Stripe is taking in the price in cents. So now we have the Stripe instance, we have the price, and we have everything we need to create a session. So to our session, we can provide the line items we want to purchase, and we can do that by deleting what we have here and instead saying price underscore data, where the currency is equal to USD, the unit amount is equal to price, the product underscore data is equal to name order.event title. And finally, right below, we can provide a quantity of 1. Finally, we need to provide some metadata that we want to pass over, such as the event ID is equal to order.event ID, and the buyer ID is equal to order.buyer ID. Mode is going to be payment. We don't need the automatic tags, but we're going to keep the success URL and the cancel URL. Now let's see what is our TypeScript complaining about. It says that the currency, which I misspelled, does not exist in type price data. Here we go. How useful it is to have TypeScript be here and tell you misspelled your variable wrong. If I spell it correctly, it looks good. Also, we need to add a comma right here. And then we need to fix our URL. We can do that by, instead of calling rec.headers.origin, we can call the process.env.next_public_server_URL. If we succeed, we're going to point to /profile. And if we don't succeed, we're going to point to just /. There we go. Finally, we want to redirect to the session.url like this. And this redirect is coming from next navigation. This is how we initialize a Stripe checkout order. But we're not done yet. Let's close all of the currently open files and let's go back to checkout. Let's also go to our mobile mode and open up localhost 3000. Here, it looks like I misspelled use server, so let's fix that. That's going to be in the order.actions. That's use server. We're back. And now on the checkout, once we try to check out, it's going to call the server action and trigger the Stripe initiate checkout. So let's give it a shot. Let's click the button. If I click it, I get invalid URL, undefined /profile. It must begin with HTTP or HTTPS. So remember how when in the checkout order, we used this next public server URL, we have to define it. So if we go back right here to .env.local, we can define a new variable, next public server URL, and for now, we can make it localhost. If I save it, reload this page, and then click buy ticket, you can see that we are redirected to the best-in-class worldwide checkout. Now, there's still a couple of steps we have to do before we can proceed with our payment. Because we don't only want to process our payments, we also want to store the information about the order within our database. That way, we'll be able to retrieve it and on the profile page, show the user all of the different orders or tickets that they have purchased, like this. So how do we do that? Well, we're diving a bit deeper than what usual YouTube videos dive into when it comes to Stripe. We're going to use Stripe webhooks. Similar to how we use Clerk webhooks, Stripe webhooks are going to trigger once the checkout has succeeded or failed. That's going to allow us to do some action, such as create an order in the database once we actually purchase the ticket. So let's go back to Stripe dashboard. Let's expand it. Let's go to developers, then go to webhooks. As you can see, we have a nice looking representation of what happens. Our webhook is going to let us know when something happens, and then you can do something in your own database. We want to add an endpoint. And here we have to enter the endpoint URL, similar to what we had to do for Clerk. Thankfully, we have already deployed our app. So go back to Vercel, find your project, and click Visit. This is the old deployment we have published before. The only thing we need is the URL. So copy it, go back to Stripe dashboard, enter the endpoint, and then do /API /webhook /Stripe. This is where we're going to add our webhook within our application. Then you can select events you want to listen to, and we want to subscribe only to one event. Checkout.session.completed. Okay? and then click Add Events. Once again, Stripe documentation conveniently gives you different code bases. We can go for Node.js, and here you get the entire file, which you can simply copy. And then click Add Endpoint. It's enabled. And then here we need a signing secret. But before, let's paste what we copied before. Back in our app, we can close all of our files and go to App, API, Webhook, and create a new folder called Stripe. And there create a new route.ts. Now, the code that they provided us right here that we copied is code for a Node.js server. We want to modify this to suit our needs. But before we do that, let's get our webhook secret by clicking Reveal and then copying it. Now we can go back to the .env.local and we can add it right here, Stripe webhook secret. There we go. That's looking good to me. But now we have to update this route.ts to modify it from a Node.js server to a Next.js route. Similarly to what we did for Clerk, I'm going to provide you with the code for this route Stripe webhook, so you can simply copy it and paste it here. And once you do, let's go ahead and look into it together. We are importing Stripe as well as Next server, and then a special new action, which we will together create. This is going to be an action that's going to turn a Stripe successful checkout order into a document in our database. Then we have a post request right here, which is going to be triggered by the webhook. That's the beauty of it. So as soon as the order is completed, Stripe is going to ping our endpoint and provide us all the information within this body right here, which is equal to request.text. We get the signature for Stripe as per their documentation. We have the secret. And then the most important part is that we listen for a specific event type. If event type is equal to checkout.session.completed, we form this event data object with all of the order information, and we simply pass it into the create order action, which we're about to create. So let's do that right away by going to lib actions order action and create a new export const create order is equal to an async function that accepts an order of a type create order param, which has to be imported from types. Then we open up a new try and catch block. In the catch, we try to handle the error by importing the utils handle error functionality. And in the try, we're trying to modify the database. So we have to await, connect to database, which we have to import from /database. Then we want to form a new order by saying const new order is equal to await order dot create, like this. And this order has to be imported from our database models. To that order, we spread the entire order coming from params, and we pass the event equal to order.eventID, as well as the buyer equal to order.buyer ID. And finally, once we create the order, we want to return json.parse and json.stringify new order. Great. So now, once this webhook triggers, we will create a new instance of an order in the database. Now, to fully test all of this out, what we have to do is push this code to Vercel so that we actually expose this endpoint to be pinged by Stripe's webhook. So to do that, let's first copy all of this new environment variables that we have created, which I believe are these ones right here. And let's push this code to GitHub by running git add, git commit -m, implement Stripe, and then git push. This is going to trigger another redeployment, and we can go back to Vercel. Notice that redeployment is in progress, or at least queued, but what we should have done before is go to Settings, Environment Variables, and then we need to paste all of these new environment variables right here and click Save. Now, if we go back and reload, this deployment is being queued, so let's give it a minute. And once it builds, I want to redeploy it anyway one more time to ensure that our environment variables we just added are taken into account. So let's wait until this is done, and then we can check out our project. And there we go, we are ready. I'm gonna go back to our application right here, or rather to project, and then click visit. This is going to give us just the plain URL, which we deployed our app on, and here we can see our 2 events. That's great. Now we can test out our webhook and see if it's triggered once we actually complete our order. So we can do that either on the deployed website or we can do it on our local host. Let's try to do it on our local host for now because that's how we have been testing this entire time. I'm back on localhost 3000/events on the GitHub Universe event, and I'm gonna click Buy Ticket. I get redirected to Stripe. I can enter my email and just enter 4242 and keep typing that out until the end. This is the default demo Stripe card. And click Pay. Once this happens, we should be redirected. So let's see if that happens. We are redirected back to the profile. And now if we go to our webhook, let's see if an event is going to get triggered. It still says waiting for events. If I reload, we have one completed checkout session complete. This is great. So that means that our event in the database should have been created as well. Of course, to check that out, we can either go to our MongoDB Atlas and to see it there, or we can create a server action within orders right here to fetch all of our orders. So let's try to do just that. The code for this is not hard, but it is a bit lengthy. So down in the description in the README, you can find the last remaining 2 server actions. You can copy them and then paste them here. Once you copy them, you'll notice a couple of errors. First, for this orders, we have to import the event from database models event model. We also need to import this type. And for the above one, we have to import the type as well. And we have to import the object ID coming from MongoDB by saying import object ID from MongoDB. And we have to put it in braces. There we go. And finally, there is one last error here saying that we need to import the user model as well. Now, I know that was a lot of code, but let me explain it all right away. We have 2 separate server actions. One is to get orders by event, and the other one is to get orders by user. We're going to use the get orders by user when we want to display the tickets that a specific user has bought on their profile. And we're going to use the get orders by event when the organizer wants to see how many tickets have been sold for a specific event. So let's first start with the get orders by ID. We connect to the database, we implement pagination, more on that later. We set the conditions where the buyer is the user ID. We get the distinct event ID, and then we find it based off of the conditions, which is that the buyer has to be this specific user. We sort it by the newest buys. We skip it for pagination, and we populate all the event information. Finally, we return that data back. So let's actually put this to use by going back all the way to the profile page. Remember, we got the events that we have organized, but we haven't yet implemented the collection where we can see which tickets have we purchased. So right at the top of this page, we can call the const orders is equal to await get orders by user. We need to pass in the user ID as well as the page, which for now we can set to 1. We need to import it from actions, and then we can map over those orders by only get the event information. So const ordered events is equal to orders (data.map), where we get each individual order of a type I order, which we need to import from models order. And for each one, we simply return the order.event or it's going to be an empty array. There we go. This now allows us to map over our orders by uncommenting this entire section and passing the ordered events.data right in here. If we save that, you can see that we cannot read properties of data.length in the collection, so apparently the data that is coming right here is incorrect. What we can do is just console log the ordered events so we can see what we're getting. Let's console log and save it. And then we can open up the terminal. And it appears that we do get some data. Ordered events is an array of different events. That looks good to me. So let's see why in the collection we have an error. If we go right here, we're passing the ordered events.data. Oh, I don't think we have to do data anymore. It is just ordered events because we have already mapped over them right here on the top. So if we now save it, there we go. We have one event bought. Keep in mind, I'm on my different account right now, so we don't have any events organized, but we have tickets that we have purchased. That is amazing. Now, the way in which we're going to make the pagination work is by using the search params. Back in our deployed application on our profile, we don't really have the pagination. But if we had more events created, we would be able to paginate using the URL query. Simply saying something like page, or rather question mark page, is equal to 1, 2, or 3. So how do we implement that? Well, it's quite simple. We simply get access to these search params through props. And they're going to be of a type search param props. Once you get it, they're going to expose whatever you put in your URL. So we can say something like const orders page is equal to convert into a number the search params question mark dot orders page or default it to 1. And we can repeat the same procedure for the events page like this. And now instead of saying the default page right here for both of these is 1, we can set the page to orders page is orders page and events page is events page. What that's going to do is it's going to send the correct page back to our server action so we can get it back. Similarly, the page we have to pass here is now going to be the orders page. And the total number of pages is going to be orders question mark dot total pages. And for our organized events, we want to pass the page of events page. And we want to pass the organized events question mark dot total pages. There we go. Now you can see this card on our profile is looking a bit empty, especially for the lower part. If I'm not mistaken, I believe we have left something out to do in the card. So if we go to a collection, and if we go into a card, here, down below, we should be able to navigate to the order details. Oh, but that has order link is only going to be true if we are on the events organized, not my tickets bought. Yes, that's correct. So if we have organized the event, then we should be able to see who bought it. So I think this is the perfect time to navigate over to my second account, which is the organizer for this event. I'm gonna log out and I sign back in with JS Mastery. Now, if I go back to my profile and if we expand it, and now for the events organized, for GitHub Universe, we have the order details, which now points us to yet another page, which is the orders page. So let's go ahead and immediately create a route for that page by closing all of the currently open files, going to app, root, create a new folder called orders, and then create a new file called page.tsx, inside of which we can run rafce and call it orders page. There we go. We can see a new page. How convenient is it with Next.js? And what we have to do here is just form a table of all of the orders that we have. This doesn't have to be anything special. We can use the default HTML5 table elements. Since this is more so coding out the layout, I don't want you to spend all the time writing out table rows and table headings. The code for this entire orders page is down below in the README, so copy it and paste it right here. Once you paste it, if you save it, you're gonna see that everything is gonna work, but we need to create one incredibly important component, which we didn't do so far, and that is the search component. The same component that we also need to implement on our homepage. Yep, now that we have more events, it's finally the time to implement the search and filtering, which is also going to be happening in the orders page. So just to see how our order page looks like, let's create a new shared component called search.tsx, run rafce, and right off the bat, if I replace this right here, you'll be able to see our profile page. There we go. So if I expand it, you can see that it is nothing more than a simple table where we can see the order ID, the event title, the buyer, and if you want to, you can also add a buyer email, so it's super convenient for you to just send them the access to the event, created, and the amount. You can think of this as the admin interface for our event management platform. But of course, what if we have many users here, which is often going to be the case? Let's say you are the admin of the event and you are at the entrance. People are coming with their tickets and giving you their emails or names, but you have to check each and every one of them in an instant. That's why we're going to implement search, so you can really easily search for their order ID or just their name or email. So to do it, we can now go back. And since we have more things to search and filter on our homepage, we can start implementing it here. So let's open up the homepage by going to Pages and then Root. And let's utilize our newly created search component by importing it from Components Shared Search. And let's dive into it and start implementing it. To start with our search, we can first create a state field that's going to keep track of our search value. We can do that by creating a use state snippet and calling it query. Set query, at the start set to an empty string. We need to import the use state from React, and since we are using states, that immediately means that this is a use client component. So we can say use client right at the top. Now that we have the query, let's wrap everything in a div and give it a class name equal to flex-center, min-h-54 pixels, w-full, overflow-hidden, rounded-full, bg-gray-50, padding x of 4, and padding y of 2. That's going to create an outline for our search. Within it, let's show an image. This image will be imported from next image, and we can give it a source equal to /assets/icons/search.svg. We can also give it an alt tag of search, and we can give it a width and a height of 24 pixels. Now we have a nice looking search icon. Right below that image, let's create an input field, which is going to be a self-closing input component imported from dot/UI/input. We can give it a type is equal to text, as well as a placeholder equal to something like search for now. Finally, let's give it an onChange property equal to where we check for the event and then set the query based off of the event's target value. Also, let's style it a bit better by giving it a class name p-regular-16, border-0, bg gray of 50, outline-offset-0, placeholder text-gray-500, focus border-0, focus-visible ring of 0, focus-visible ring of offset 0. If we now save this, it's going to make it look uniform with this div that we have, and we can start typing within it. That's great. But now let's implement the functionality for our search. We can do that by keeping track of our query within a use effect. So let's create a new use effect hook where we have a callback action, and it's going to be re-triggered every time that the query changes. Let's also import use effect from React. Now inside of here, we could immediately trigger our API and get all of the latest events matching our search filters. But that would result in so many unnecessary API calls. What we can do instead is create something known as a debounce function by saying const delay debounce fn. And this function is going to only trigger after a specific timeout. So we can say that's equal to set timeout with a callback function within it. And then the second parameter is the time in milliseconds on how long it will wait before it makes that API call. We can do something like 300 milliseconds. Then we can check if we have the query, we want to form a new URL based off of that query by saying const new URL is equal to form URL query. This is one of our utility functions to which we can pass params equal to, and now we have to be careful. We have to get the current existing value from the search. So let's set it to an empty string for now. And when we are in the search, once we modify it, we want to also modify our search query right here to say something like query is equal to test. So what is in here and what is in the URL has to be the same. So let's get access to this query from the URL by using the search params. We can do that by saying const search params is equal to use search params coming from next navigation. Now we can set our params to be equal to search params dot toString. We can also pass a key equal to query and the value equal to the value of the query. There we go. On the other hand, if we clear out this string, we want to remove that query from the top. So in that case, we can say else. We can form the same new URL by copying it, but we want to call remove keys from query from libutils. We want to pass the new search params, but we want to call keys to remove to be equal to an array of query. Then whatever new URL we have, we want to navigate to it by using the router functionality. So let's get the router at the top by saying const router is equal to use router coming from next navigation. We need to call it. And finally, we want to navigate to wherever we are by doing router.push, where we push to a new URL, and we can set the scroll to false to keep the current amount of scroll. Of course, now we're outside of this new URL, so let's define the new URL at the top equal to an empty string, and then we can just reset it in each one of these if and else statements. Finally, we have to clear this delay debounce function by calling return, and then returning the clear timeout that has the delay debounce function declaration passed as a prop. And we want to recall this not only when the query changes, but also when the search params or the router change as well. Great. So now check this out. If I start typing something here, like ASD, the query automatically changes to ASD. If I remove it, it's gone. If I type something like, let's search for ultimate, you can see it made only one request to ultimate, but if I slowly remove one by one, it's going to remove them one by one as well. So A, S, D, it updates only every 300 milliseconds, not to overload our API or our database. We can also accept a dynamic placeholder through props right here by saying placeholder. We can give it a default value of search title, ... which is going to be of a type placeholder, which is going to be optional and of a type string. And now we can use this placeholder right here dynamically to say search title. Now, this by itself is not going to automatically filter our events. If I type universe, even though this changes, it doesn't filter out just the universe. So for this to take effect, we have to go back to our homepage. And here, you can see that we're calling the get all events. So why don't we read this query from the URL now that this function is really conveniently setting it up for us? We can do that by getting access to search params, which is of a type search param props. Then we can set some variables right here at the top, such as getting the page number, which is equal to a number of search params dot page or 1. We also want to get the search text by saying const search text is equal to search params dot query as string or an empty string. And finally, we want to do the same thing for the category once we implement it in the future. Now we're getting all of these parameters, specifically the query from the URL, and we can read it and send it over to our get all events. So query is equal to search text, category is equal to category, page is equal to page, and limit we can leave as 6 for now. It's complaining a bit about the category. That's just because I forgot a comma. So if I add it, it's good. We're passing the search text as query to get all events. And then get all events takes this title condition, does a regular expression on it, and simply passes it in the event.find, which then filters it out. And finally, if you type something out, you have boat, we have ultimate, and we have universe. And if I type just you, you're going to have boat, but as soon as we dive deeper, it's going to give you the 1. So our search is now fully functional using the best practices of Next.js 14 server actions as well as search params. Now let's also implement the category filter by scrolling a bit down and then creating a new category filter component within shared components .tsx. We can run rafce and simply import the category filter right here, coming from components shared category filter. And then we can navigate to it. The category filter is going to work on the same principle as the search did, but it will use a select instead of an input. So let's find a shatcn select element right here in the documentation, install it if we haven't already, but I believe we did, and then import everything we need to make it happen right here. We can also just import the base use of the select component and paste it here. There we go. Now, if we save it and go back, you can see that now we have a nice looking filter, but let's make it fit our needs. We're going to reference to a lot of the things that we used in the input because the principle is the same. So let's go to the search and let's copy everything above this bottom part, everything above JSX, the use effect as well as all the states, and just paste them right here in the category filter. We're going to also use the use router, which you can import. We're going to use the use state as well. We're going to also use the use router, which you can import from Next Navigation. Don't make a mistake and import from Next Router. We're going to import use state as well from React. We can import use search params, use effect as well, form URL query, and remove keys from query. There we go. And the only thing we have to change is from query to categories and from set query to set categories. And then in the use effect, we can use the categories right here. We're going to also create a new function called const on select category, which accepts only one param, category of a type string, and then we can do some logic later on. But for now, let's fix this error. Since we're using the onSelect, the use effect, and all the other things, we have to make this a use client. And also, we have an error defining the query in the if right here. We can just change this over to categories for now. There we go. And now we can make it look better by giving this select trigger a class name of select dash field. And the placeholder can be category. We can also, on the select, add the on value change equal to a callback function where we get the value of a type string, and we call the on select category to which we pass the value. Finally, we're not going to have light darken system. We're going to only keep the one default one, which is going to be all categories, given a value of all, and a class name equal to select dash item p dash regular dash 14. That's looking good. But now we want to map over all of the categories that exist in our database. For that, we're going to use the same function that we used when creating our categories. If you remember, in the create event, here we make a call to get all the categories. So let's go to our event form, and let's copy the part where we fetch all the categories. I believe that's in the special category component. Yep, that's the drop-down component. And from here, we can copy the code for this entire use effect. Go back to our category filter and just paste it above our current use effect. Get categories is equal to category list, where we import this get all categories from the actions. And then we set the category list as iCategory, which we have to import from database models. And also we have to define the type of the categories to be equal to iCategory and an array right here. And this is also going to be an array. Now, if we reload the page, now if we go back to home, you can see that we have an error happening. And once again, maybe our error handling is not doing the best job of properly displaying it. But we can see string value object for value type array at path title for model event. It looks like we're not doing something well. Let's see. I'm going to comment out this entire use effect which we brought from the query. It is most likely possible that it's messing with us right now. So I want to comment it out. And we still have that error. If we open up our console, it kind of points at home, line 28. So let's see what's happening at line 28. It looks like we're passing the category right here. And let's see how the get all events is accepting it. So it's getting the category condition, get category by name, category, or null. But it's looking only if it exists. So this shouldn't really matter. What I think could be messing with it is that in our category filter, for a brief point in time, we had this, and then it updated the wrong value of categories right here, and then it's messing with our query right now. So if you're still having this issue, just reset the query to be equal to an empty string, and then it should be working. Or simply clear out the entire query at the top, and then bring it back right here to search text. Now it's going to work. It's just that when we copy this use effect here, it caused some issues. But we're going to fix that soon. The most important thing right now is for us to get these categories right here, which are going to populate the categories. That now allows us to go back here below the select item all, and then map over the categories by calling the categories dot map, where we get an individual category and immediately return a select item that renders the category dot name. Each select item needs to have a value equal to category dot name, a key equal to category dot underscore ID, and a class name equal to select dash item p dash regular dash 14. If we now save it, you can see we get all of our categories, which is great, but this is not yet affecting our search params. So to make that work, we have to pull some of the parts of our previous use effect into our onSelect category. Why did we have it in the use effect for the input, but we're going to have it in a function call for our select? That's because we had to listen for key presses in our input, but here we can do something whenever we click something, right? So let's simply pull the inner part of this, where we set the new URL all the way to router.push, and copy that, delete the rest, and then paste what you copied here. First, we form a new URL. Then we check if category and category is not equal to all is true. If it is, we form a new URL with params to string where the key is category and value is category. Similarly, we want to remove the category from here in case we delete the category. So if you've done that, and if you select all, nothing will happen. But if you select Next.js, immediately a category of Next.js will be added, and you can switch between different ones, but only if you come back to all will be showing and nothing will be here. And if we go to AI, nothing, or artificial intelligence, nothing. But if I go to Next.js, we have both of these here because they both have a tag of Next.js. This is phenomenal. And with that, we have completed the full search and filtering of our homepage. So let's close it, close all of the pages, and let's focus on adding the pagination. Yep, we're going to go that far as well. On top of search and filtering, we want to be able to paginate to improve the initial page load time. So to do that, just create a new shared component called pagination.tsx, where you can run RAFCE. And then we want to head over to our collection component. A collection is where we map over all of the elements. And we want to go right below the UL. So right before where we end all of our elements, and check if total pages is greater than 1, then we want to call our newly created pagination component. To that pagination, we want to pass the URL param name equal to URL param name, a page equal to page, and total pages equal to total pages. All of these are props that we're passing over right here to our collection component. So now we can import the pagination from that/pagination, head into it, and accept all of these new exciting props that are going to allow us to make the pagination happen. So inside of here, we can get the page, total pages, as well as URL param name, which is going to be of a type pagination props, which we can define just above. The pagination props is going to be a type that's going to be an object where page is either a number or a string, total pages is a number, and URL param name is an optional string parameter. Now, believe it or not, the same principle on top of which we have built the search and filtering functionality, we're going to build the pagination on. We're going to use search params. So let's immediately get access to the router by saying const router is equal to use router coming from next navigation. And let's also get the search params, which is equal to use search params coming from next navigation. Of course, since we have a hook, this has to be a use client component. We didn't have that many though, right? We had a lot of server-side rendered pages, but only a few client-side components such as input, filter, and pagination. We're going to have a function called onClick, so const onClick, where we can get the access to the btn type, more on that soon, of a type string. It's going to be either previous or next. And here we can do the logic. So let's create those two buttons that are going to form our pagination. Our div is going to have a class name equal to flex and a gap of 2. And within it, we want to render a button that's going to say previous. It's going to be imported from UI button, and it's going to have a size equal to LG, a variant equal to outline, a class name equal to W28, an onClick property calling the onClick like this, and passing prev as in previous, and then disabled If we are on a number page, if that is lower than or equal to 1, that means that we cannot go previous. And we want to duplicate this button below. This one is going to go next. And we cannot go further if the number of pages is greater than or equal to total pages. If we save this, and also modify this text to say next, if we go down, you can see previous and next where we can go next. But right now, it's not going to work because we haven't yet hooked it up to our router. But hey, they at least appear right here at the bottom. So now on click, as I told you, we use the same exact principle to make it happen. First, we have to figure out, do we go forward or do we go backwards? And we can do that by figuring out the page number we're going to be on once we do the change. So const page value is equal to, if a btn type is triple equal to next. In that case, it's going to be number of the page plus 1. Else, it's going to be number of the page minus 1. That's going to look like this. Once we have the page value, we form a new URL by saying const new URL is equal to form URL query coming from libutils, where we pass params equal to search params dot toString. We pass a key of URL param name or just a string of page, and we pass a value equal to page value dot toString. There we go. Finally, we use the router to call the router.push, navigate to this new URL, and don't reset the scroll. So we can see scroll false. If we save this, and if we click next, you're going to notice we go onto the second page, and the page says 2. But something seems to be broken here. So let's just remove the entire query. And as you can see, this works. But it seems like we cannot go backwards right now. So maybe if we go to the collection, we have to properly set this up. If the total pages number is greater than 1, then we have the pagination. But in this case, we have only 2 posts, so we shouldn't be seeing the pagination at all. So let's see why the total pages number is greater than 1. That's coming all the way here to our homepage, I believe. Here, we're passing the collection, and we're saying, oh, the total pages is static right now, set to 2. I'm glad that it was set to that, because that allowed us to see the pagination. But right now we have only 2, so if we use the real value of events, $total pages, and pass the actual page right here, then it's going to disappear, because the number of total pages is less than 2. So this is exactly what we wanted, and with that, the pagination is functional as well. With that said, let's expand our app to admire it in its full glory. It's getting more and more finished every second, and right now, it's looking wonderful. We have a great looking hero section with a nice illustration. We immediately show the events, even though the user is logged out, with automatic search and filtering, so we can search for different categories. That works. We have the event detail pages, where we can see all the information about the event and even purchase it. We can navigate to related events, and we can also get tickets for those events as well. But the price is 0. That works as well. Not to say that we can also delete events with this great looking pop-up and also update them as well, which opens up this entire form that we have created. It's a big one, and it autofills all the data. Let's not forget that we can also create events using it. And we have my profile page where we can see all of the events that we have organized. But hey, did we do this part where we can purchase some events? Yes, we did that too. But this account is just the organizer. We didn't purchase any tickets from there. So all of this is working perfectly. We have phenomenal account management using Clerk. And I don't even have to point it out because we've been looking at it this entire time, but the app is fully mobile responsive. We have been building it mobile first, in this case, because we've been looking at the mobile version. Now, there is one small tweak I noticed we need to make, and that is if you go to the details page, here we see the pagination, even though we don't have too many things to paginate. So let's search for all instances of where we call the collection, and let's ensure that we're properly passing the total page number like we are here on the home page. So on the second instance, yep, we hard-coded it. So here we have to say total pages is related events dot total pages, and the page is going to be search params dot page as string. We can also make the limit 3 because we cannot fit more on the details page. Let's go to the next one. Here we have done it properly, and the last one we have done it properly. Let's also check the next one. Here we can also set the limit to 3, and we have done it properly. And the last one also can be a limit of 3, and we have done it properly here as well. And what that means is that we are done with this entire application. Notice that the search right here in the orders should be working automatically. If we search by buyer name, it actually updates the search. And if I type JavaScript, it works. If I type mastery, it works. If I type something random, it doesn't return anything. So this is it. Evently, the event management platform. And in the JavaScript mastery style, I want to teach you how to deploy it as well. So going back right here, believe it or not, the only thing we have to do is just open up our terminal, stop the app from running, and then run git add dot git commit -m, finish the app, and then git push. Using Vercel's automatic deployments, our app should automatically be deployed. So let's wait for the deployment to go through, and we can check it out. And there we go, our deployment is ready, so we can go ahead and visit our project. I closed all of the other tabs, and damn, is this looking great. We have our events right here, we're not logged out, but hey, let's try to just use the app as a regular user. Host, connect, and celebrate. Your events, our platform. Okay, let's say that I want to go to GitHub Universe 2024, or no, it's a bit too expensive. Let's go to the Ultimate Next 14 workshop. It is free after all. I can see that it is about Next.js. It's happening next Tuesday, and we're going to learn a lot. And here I can learn a bit more about the event I'll be attending. Now, let's try to buy the tickets. Oh, okay, I have to be logged in. That's okay. So let me log in using Google, and I can choose my username. So let's do Adrian JSM. We are in. I can go back to that event, and I can try to buy it. I can enter my email and complete the order. The purchase has been successful, but unfortunately we are redirected to localhost 3000 and not to our deployed website. But not to worry, that's an easy fix. You can find your project right here, go to settings, and then we have to find environment variables. And here, where we have the next public server URL, I believe that's how we called it. It's set to localhost 3000. We can edit it, and we can choose the one that we have right here by going to project and then visit, and we can simply edit it right here and save. Once you do that, you have to then redeploy our app. So let's wait until it is redeployed. The app has been redeployed, so let's try to go ahead and buy something else. In this case, I'll try to buy this one. Buy ticket. Enter all my details. There we go, and click pay. We are successful, and we have been redirected to our profile page, which means that everything is working now. Let's not also forget that now if I go to the organizer event, which is in this case Adrian as well, by logging out and then logging in as the other user, we can go to my profile and see the events we have organized and go to their order details and see all of the people that have purchased. This is great. This was a long video, but hey, if you're here until the end, you've learned many great things. You've learned the best practices of using Next 14, Tailwind CSS, ShadCN, server actions, and more. And if you're really still watching, leave a comment down below. Say, hey, I finished it. I really appreciate you for staying until the end because not a lot of people do. It means you're passionate and it means you want to be the best developer you can be. For that reason, I want to speak with you directly. If you like this video and the project, and you haven't yet purchased the Ultimate Next 14 course, I want to let you know that you can do that right now. You can see all of the best practices we talked about. We just dive much deeper into them within the course. Hydration errors, SEO, data fetching, routing, server actions, animation, global state management, a lot of stuff we touch on there, and especially how to make your apps optimized. We do it with deep dives where I really illustrate all of the concepts needed to learn Next.js. Then we build and deploy a much larger and bigger app than this one, which is our Stack Overflow clone. And then we also have active lessons where you can replicate your knowledge to ensure you have properly learned what's being taught. And of course, there's this phenomenal app that we're going to build, which is the Stack Overflow clone application. You'll learn as much as you can, and you're essentially becoming a top 1% Next.js developer. We also use amazing technologies in there, such as Next.js, TypeScript, MongoDB, ShadCN, and of course, Clerk for authentication. With that said, huge congrats for coming to the end of this video, and have a wonderful day.